Hello, welcome everyone to another Wild Food UK interview. It's a very special interview today. I'm with John Wright, who lives in rural Dorset amongst the chalk hills, and for 30 years he was a country cabinet maker while following his great passion for the fungi and of course foraging. In about 2000, he met Hugh Fernley-Whittingstall and became involved in the River Cottage programme, which I'm sure a lot of you will have watched. And he appeared on many episodes. And you were also in lots of little 15-minute shorts, I remember watching as well, John. A few years later, Hugh asked him to write the River Cottage Mushroom Handbook, which is one of my most well-used books that you can see here. Since then, he's had 5 more books published. The Naming of the Shrew, all about the Latin names we give to organisms. I'm going to be a bit pedantic about that one in a minute, John, I've got to say. A Natural History of the Hedgerow, The Forager's Calendar, which is a really fantastic forager's book. I highly recommend that everyone has this in their collection. A Spotter's Guide to the Countryside, and The Observant Walker. He's now working on grasslands, where he's making a plea for species-rich grasslands such as chalk downlands, uplands and lowland meadows, acid grasslands and so on, by explaining what is lost when the plough comes out of the shed. So welcome, John. It is a true pleasure to have you on the channel.
Well, thank you, Marlo. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Good stuff. Well, we met a fair few years ago at one of the meetings where we were fighting the good fight for foragers down in the New Forest against the Forestry Commission. And we've met a couple of times since then. It's certainly absolutely great to see you, because we haven't caught up for a fair few years now. You're still writing. You've been quite prolific, and you're still writing books.
Yes, I just keep on going. But this is my last book. The Grasslands book is my last book that's on commission. I've got 1 or 2 more ideas in my head, but I worked out that I've actually had a deadline since 2006 when I was asked to write the River Cottage mushroom book, and deadlines do get you down a little bit. It'd be nice not to have one for a while. So I'm going to not retire, but just step back a little.
I know a bit about book deadlines. We've got a few at the moment. But let's go back to the beginning, John. What started you off foraging? What got you into foraging?
It was mushrooms, and it wasn't about foraging as such. It was just finding something, and I can actually remember precisely what it was. It's certainly not edible, and that's Daldinia concentrica. Which many people will know it as cramp balls or King Alfred's cakes. It's a black sphere growing on usually ash. And I found this in the New Forest, and I was only 14, so it was a very long time ago indeed. And it didn't fit into my rather very naive and extremely ignorant view of the natural world, where there's plants and there's animals. There was this thing which was very, very hard, and it was growing there. How can something so hard grow out of a tree? And I broke it off and took it back. Used to have to go to the library in those days, and I found out it was Daldinia concentrica, and that was it. I was hooked on the fungi right from the beginning, and then I moved to Dorset, and we lived in my wife and I, newly married. We lived in a farmhouse on top of a hill, and it was chalk down, and this is one of the chalk downlands I talk about in the new book, and it was the most glorious place, and there's fungi everywhere. We also were extremely poor and we didn't have a car. We lived 2 miles from the nearest shop, not just down the road. It was down a hill, up a hill, down a hill, and of course, up a hill, down a hill, up a hill to come back just to get our groceries. So we started picking mushrooms a bit, and we looked at the other things. I mean, obviously blackberries and sloes and things, all the other things that we could find. In part, I think mostly for the enjoyment of doing it, because it's a great pleasure to do these things. But also to stock the larder without having to walk so far.
That sounds like a good thing. I always say to people that it's good for the mind, the body, and your general well-being foraging. Because you're learning. It's fun to learn. You're walking, which is good for the body, and just being outside and doing that is something that we're almost evolved to do, and it gives you a sort of relaxing sense of pleasure just being out in nice places and being able to find your own food.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I've seen this. Taken about 1,000 forays over the years, and I see it pretty well every time. People say there's so much stuff around. I had no idea. Have you taken me to a special place as well? Okay, it is quite a good place, but really the difference today is you're actually looking, and people love to actually see things, but they never really noticed they were there because they weren't looking. And I've had people at the end of people say a walk will never be the same again. I've heard that so many times, and I'm always pleased to hear it. And I've actually had people at the end of the day in tears, not in tears of misery, in tears of sheer joy. And foray I did a few years ago in the New Forest was this man who he was a gentleman. He was on his own. I think he'd been given the day as a present, and I wasn't sure he particularly wanted to be there. And we offered him my wife does these with me. We offered him a glass of wine at lunchtime, and he said, "Oh no, thank you." But at the end of the day, he said, "Have you still got that bottle of wine?" And Diane said, "Yes, yeah." He said, I think I'll have that drink now." And he said, "And how often do you hear this? I am happy." Just straight, "I am happy." And I thought, gotcha.
It's a very rewarding and pleasurable experience. We get the same thing on our courses, and we sell a lot of gift vouchers where people have been bought the day, like you say, and they're a bit unsure when they first turn up. Or corporate groups, they're the funniest ones. So you've got 15 people that are coming out from an office, and there's 2 or 3 that were interested at the beginning, and they're the ones that had booked the day foraging, and 12 other people who are just desperate to get to the afternoon meal and the pub. And by the end of the day, they're all interested, and they're all enjoying nature. Because we talk about being foraging teachers, but I think that essentially what we do is we teach people about nature. And nature's so interesting that after you get a little bit of a grounding and a little bit of an understanding, and I love the title of your book, The Observant Walker. It gives you when you're looking and you see things and you understand them a little bit more, they become more interesting, and it makes you, or it inspires you to then go on and want to learn more. And that takes me on to one of the quotes that I really like from your The Forager's Calendar book, which is searching for food is completely natural, with a history going back to the first animals. What it is not is a fad, or worse still, a middle-class fad. And I really love that line. I get told by so many people that I'm lucky that I got into foraging at this time, because foraging's become trendy. But I like to say to them, look, trends come and go, but you're always going to have to eat. And why not eat good free food? And that's what we go looking for.
Well, that sentence you kindly read out. I mean, there's real feeling behind that, because I found it was so dismissive to say that, and so ignorant to say that it's a middle class fad. I mean, it's absurd. My grandmother foraged. She was a country lass from Wiltshire, and she would go out picking mushrooms first thing in the morning. And that's what most people have done throughout history. And it's ridiculous to call it a fad or anything like that. I mean, you don't have to do it all the time. I mean, people do. One of the criticisms, of course, of foraging is you're going to destroy the environment. But of course, a careful forager would never do that. You just take a little bit here and a little bit there, and never go mad. And I always try to do that. But it is natural. Indeed, one of the my rebuffs to people who say this, I say, well, where does your food come from? And of course, they
Yeah.
suddenly have to go into the whole, the whole agricultural thing. And not that I could criticize agriculture, we wouldn't survive without it. But there's very little that doesn't have any impact on the natural world. In fact, the only things I can think of that are completely positive, and I'm sure there must be others, but the ones that come straight to mind are both seashore things, cultivated mussels and cultivated seaweeds. They actually improve actually introduce a new ecosystem into the sea.
Yeah, I suppose growing your own food's a good thing to do, and probably has less impact. But when you forage food, clearly it's done no air miles, and it doesn't come wrapped in plastic, and it hasn't had fertilizers and pesticides or giant swathes of acres of monoculture fields put in place for it. So when you're foraging, the food that you're taking home has I always feel anyway that it's having a lot less environmental impact. Obviously, there are foragers that do things wrong. There's certain people, I mean, Epping Forest, we know about the stories about people being caught leaving Epping Forest with 60 kilos of mushrooms to then sell to restaurants and suppliers. And obviously, Epping Forest is a little bit under pressure because of the immense footfall that all the green spaces near to London do suffer from. But you're right, a normal forager will take enough for to put a bit of salad or a few mushrooms on the side of their plate. We aren't doing ecological damage when we do that.
I think the one thing which really encapsulates what you're saying is when you pick something, you have the provenance, and also there is a feeling of ownership, true ownership, which you don't get. Okay, you do get that, as you say, when you're gardening, but when you go to even a good greengrocers, you don't have that feeling of ownership. This is a transaction. There's a transaction, but there's no real transaction when you forage. You take something, and it is yours, and you've done it carefully, so you can feel good about it.
Yes, absolutely. So you said that your nan used to take you out picking mushrooms and things like that. You're quite lucky in that sense, I think, because in Britain we don't really have much of a mushroom foraging culture. Not like places in Europe like Poland and Italy and France. So you're lucky in that sense. My nan used to take me out picking mushrooms, but then we'd try and dry them in the back of a book like you would with flowers. It never really worked very well, funnily enough.
Makes sense. It makes a terrible mess of the book. I can tell you that straight away. I think I found a few mushrooms inadvertently squashed between the pages of an expensive book. It's not a good thing. No, we used to go out mushrooming. That was really when we lived in North Hampshire, in a little village up there. But also, I remember the most exciting days of my childhood, and it took me a long time to work out why I enjoyed those days more than any other of my childhood. And those were two things. We moved to Portsmouth, and we would either go cockling in Langstone Harbour, and put our hands in the mud and get all these cockles out, or my father would drive us up Portsdown Hill. If anybody knows Portsmouth, there's a big hill, a big chalk hill above the town. We drive over the hill in his 1928 Morris, and then he'd turn the engine off at the top and go as fast as conceivably it ever did down the other side and go blackberry picking. Those days, they were every year for years and years and years, and they were the essence of my childhood, I think. and I think back to those days with great joy.
I
I
can
think
I can
I
see
think
that in your face, actually. Yeah, it's 1928 Morris, though. I assume the car was quite old by the time he was taking you out, by the sounds of things.
honestly, Marlo, it was very old already, and people would people in also in vintage or old cars would toot and wave as we went past. You just have to wind it up with a handle at the beginning of the day.
Right. Since we last met, I've procreated, John. I've got a 3-year-old daughter. In fact, she's 4 in a couple of weeks, and she absolutely loves going blackberry picking. She loves coming out to find mushrooms with me. So you're making me feel like I'm doing the right thing. I'm not sure that teaching her all of the scientific names. She can actually tell me the scientific name of the goblet now. So she's the only 3-year-old I know who can say Pseudoclytocybe cyatiformis. I might be taking it a little bit too far with her there, but she loves going out blackberry picking. She absolutely loves it. And it's a great thing to do with kids. Kids are a sponge. They learn so much. They so much more easily than old people like us, John, if you don't mind me saying. And I I tend to think that things you learn in those years stay with you, and if not the facts and the scientific names, the memories, like you say. So take your kids out foraging, people. They will enjoy it. It will be something that they'll probably remember for the rest of their lives. And I take out groups every single week, and quite a lot of the time we get children on the courses that have been on 2 or 3 courses already, because the parents have seen that they really enjoy it. And I honestly get children coming to the front when I start talking about things, like even certain types of mushroom. Those children, 7, 8, or 9 years old, can remember everything that I've taught them from courses before. And I quite often let them take over because they can almost parrot fashion say all of the things that I've taught them. So get your kids into foraging, people. It's a great thing to do. Right now, for a little bit of pedantism, John. I hope you don't mind, but your naming of the shrew. You and everywhere you mention it, you talk about them being Latin names,
Yes,
rather than scientific names, John. This is something I'm trying to drum into people on this channel, is that they're actually made up of a bit of Greek, and I did a video which is going to be published soon about the magnolia, which is Magnolia archie, and that was named after Pierre Magnol, who was the first person to sort of document it. But you still refer to them as Latin names.
I do explain that in the book. I said there's lots of things are Latin names, and I said technically they are scientific Latinized names of biological organisms. I cannot go through the whole book repeating that phrase because it's just absurd. So I said, I'm sorry about this. It's not accurate, but it's just too much like hard work to do more. Too much like hard work to read, let alone write.
Sounds like a fun book. I think it's about the only book of yours that I haven't actually got. So please send me a copy. I'd like to have a read through of that one. Can you remember
Yes.
any of the scientific names or the Latin names that stand out as being quite amusing for you?
Oh goodness me, how long have we got? Um, I, I mean, the book is actually quite serious, but it's serious in a funny way. It gets more complicated as you go. It sort of starts off quite cheerfully with all the weird and wonderful names. Unfortunately, I can only remember the really rude, funny ones at the moment. But
That's fine. Don't
because
worry. Go for it.
well, yeah. Are you sure they are ever so rude? Um,
Worse than
uh,
Phallus impudicus, I assume.
Oh yeah, much worse. Should we just get the worst one out of the way first?
I
It
think
really
that's
is.
what everyone watching this is dying to hear right now. Go
Okay,
for it.
So it's a bivalve shellfish. I think it's a bivalve like that, and it's the Latin name is Cunus marinus. Okay, I'm not going to translate for you. This is Linnaeus himself described. I'm not sure if he gave it that name, but he refers to the name and he says it is. It looks exactly like the in every detail, and it does as far as memory serves me. But there
Well,
we
I
go. We got
suppose
that
that's
one out of
only
the
a
way.
useful name for anyone who's ever actually seen one, I suppose. So basically, it translates pretty much as Fanny of the Sea. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes, yes. You're spot on there. The offending word. People tend to think of it as being Anglo-Saxon, but it's not. It's direct from the Latin. There's a wasp called. I was somebody decided to quite reasonably name a genus of wasp python. And of course, some idiot decided that they would add the when they found a new species, they in the python genus named it Python U. So it depends how you pronounce it. The other one is canalic. Channel structures are very common. There's the channeled rack and the channeled snail, all sorts of things. And and that's references canaliculator. So you know, canaliculator is okay, but not when you put it for a heather. And I'm sort of hesitating here. And it's Erica canaliculator. But I was very careful how this. I mean, this is one. Of the common one. This is one of the very common names that comes up in biology departments and universities, and everybody has a jolly good stick. I mean, this is trivial nonsense, but it's very funny. There's loads and loads more.
Well, it's good. It's good to know that even botanists have got a sense of humour, though. That's quite funny.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay. I'm not sure we should go on with this. We don't want to have any sort of adult rating on the YouTube channel. We're a family channel, and I think probably shouldn't go any further with that one. But let's talk about coastal foraging, because you do a lot more of that than I do. Last year we did a video down on the Cornish coast, and I know lots of the coastal. Well, I know I'm pretty good on the coastal plants, but I learned a lot about seaweeds. It was in February, which I think is one of the best times of year for the seaweeds themselves. It's obviously not the best time of year to be walking around on the coast in the freezing cold, but we had a lovely time, and I learned about things like Dumont's tubular weed. That was probably the nicest thing that we found pepper dulse and other things, but a chef that now works for us, he prepared the Dumont's tubular weed in some birch sap syrup, and it was absolutely lovely. It was one of my favourite things from the weekend. So, do you have any sort of favourites from this time of year? This video will be going out in March, which means that the seaweeds are all still pretty good and fresh. What sort of things are you looking for on the seaside at the moment?
Oh, I think sea beet is probably at its best around about now. Very soon it will come into flower. But sea beet is a very, very common. It's a member of the spinach family, and Beta vulgaris maritima. It's extremely common on the coast. You never find it. Actually, I found it in Fulham once, but why?
Wow.
Usually, almost invariably, it's on the coast.
Well,
The leaves.
technically, the Thames is coastal up to Teddington Lock, so that's his excuse for being there. But yeah, I mean, CB, isn't that the original spinach family member? Apparently, or as far as I've read before.
It's a sea beet is related to spinach, and And it tastes very much like spinach. If anything, it's actually sweeter than spinach. It doesn't have that bitterness you associate with spinach. Also, because it's a seashore plant, the leaves are very succulent. They need to be succulent to survive the harsh conditions that that the plants encounter down by the sea. So it's very succulent. So it doesn't, when you cook it, you don't end up with that like you do with spinach, that you start off with a bag about that big. If you go to the shops, you buy a bag that big. You thought that would do for the family for the weekend or something, a family of six, and you cook it, and you end up with around about that much in the middle of the pan, and surrounded by some green water. This doesn't happen nearly so much with seaweed. Also, I mean, I say now is a good time, and it's certainly better to pick it before it's bolts, before it flowers. But really, it's available all year round, and not so much further north. But I'm right on the south coast, so and it's sort of a semi tradition to go picking it on Christmas Eve for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we can pick it then. So, and it is a really excellent plant to pick. Alexanders, they're starting to go over a bit here on the south coast. I saw them in flower yesterday, I think, and actually, I spent a lot of time trying to make it edible. I've tried all sorts of recipes. I guess some people might like it. I find it a very, very strong flavour. The strong flavour, if you cook it for more than 7 minutes, disappears completely. So I think if you want to retain a bit of flavour, you cook it for 5 minutes. I've tried, still not great. I've tried candying it. That does work. I try. I mean, some of these things I try to love, but sometimes I just can't. Seaweeds should be back soon. Excuse me. I Where I live, the winter is not at all good for the seaweeds because we don't have a large tidal range to get them on the upper shore, which is where we need them here. We've only got 2.5 meter tidal range here. You need to go deeper than that. So basically, there's almost no edible seaweeds available this time of year. Not in
Oh,
Dorset
wow.
anyway, not the Dorset coast. No, but if you go, I mean Cornwall and look at the Gower Peninsula, for example, you can probably the tide goes out. What is it? 15 feet or something. It's a huge tidal range. You'll be able to pick them all year round pretty well. But we have to wait for the summer crop.
So summer and early autumn are the better times of year down in Hampshire and around Dorset then.
Yeah, if I want to pick a lot, and I do try to go down to the beach and get a year's supply of dulse at least, and maybe some carrageen, and so I dry it, and I go in September, and that's usually the best time for me.
So what do you use your dried dulse in? What sort of different dishes? How do you use it?
I do two main things with dulse. Dulse is my favourite edible seaweed. It's just
We're talking about
superb.
dulse, not pepper dulse. We're talking about dulse.
Not pepper pulp, not pepper dulse. This is dulse, which is pretty well completely unrelated. This is, I think, the Latin name is sorry, the scientific Latin name is Latinized name is Palmaria palmata because it looks like a hand. But more like a cutout of a hand, and it's also a rather dull red, almost tending to purple. And it grows quite big. Sometimes you can get them fronds about the size of your hand, but usually a bit smaller. I think it's a very useful thing to do your kitchen preparation as you pick it. So don't cut off a whole load of it. Usually it's attached to a serrated rack. Where I see it, it's attached to etc. You don't want to drag the whole lot away and sort it out later. It's best to pick a little bit at a time. That saves an awful lot of trouble back in the kitchen. And I give it a good wash. All seaweeds need a very good wash, some more than others. Palmata dulse washes very easily. And I either dry it. I dry it on. I've got a big what's left over from my daughter's trampoline. It's a sort of plasticky canvas thing, a big disc, and I put it on the lawn and chuck all the dulse on there and leave it for a couple of dry days. And then I bring it in, put it in the oven on a very low heat until it's crispy. Then I put it in the blender. I end up with dulse powder, which is one of the greatest things on earth. And this is amazing. It depends how you prepare it, but you can sprinkle it on if you've got a dish, scallops, a fish dish or something, you can sprinkle it on the plate. Absolutely transforms things because the dulse contains glutamates, which improve the flavor of things. Of course, there's a little bit of salt there, and it's got its own special flavor. So it really transforms a dish. The other thing you can do with the pepper dulse with the powdered dulse is to mix it, and I mix it with dried wild mushroom powder, and I buy in dried onion powder. You can make dried onion powder at home, but only if you want to spelt onions for the following 3 months. So I'm afraid I really have to buy that stuff. And mix them all together. Actually, I put some ground celery seeds in there too, and that's basically a stock. It's a stock powder, and unlike the stock powders you buy, it's actually made out of food, so not various chemicals. And not that I particularly criticise those stock powders. They're not too bad. The other thing I do, and you have got to try this, is to we kind of invented this at River Cottage because I went to the seashore foray there, and normally we bring back gutweed, which is the very fine, bright green seaweed, and but I've forgotten. And normally we deep fry it, so you end up with crispy seaweed, which is very nice. But I forgot one day, and the chef said, "Have you got?" No, I forgot to get it. And I said, "Well, we could try deep frying dulse." Chefs can never be left to their own devices. They have to, well, they can be left to their own devices. That's all they ever have. So he mucked about, and he actually put it in some flour first, just dabbed it more or less dry, put it in some flour, deep fried it. Wow, that is wonderful. I've never found anybody who hasn't absolutely loved it. It's you take one bite, it's sort of crunchy, the flavor fills the mouth, and it is basically seaweed Pringles. You have one, you just got to have another one.
Once you pop, you can't stop. That sounds really lovely. I can't wait to try that for myself. And your stock seasoning that you were talking about, those glutamates you were talking about, they're basically the umami side of flavor. So they're the savory flavor that makes things taste really, really nice. And it sounds almost like with your onion powder and your mushroom powder, you're making your own homemade aromat, which my business partner, Eric, is reasonably addicted to. He won't mind me saying at all. I'm going to tell him to make it himself out of dulse and mushrooms and onion powder instead in the future. That's lovely little tips. So those are sort of favourite coastal things. How it's mushroom courses we're going to be running together later in the year, and it's through fungus that we really first met and connected. So what are your favourite mushrooms, John?
Well, I like most of them. I must say I don't get quite as excited as some of my fellow foraging friends. They eat all sorts of things, and I think that's very nice, actually. But generally speaking, if it's an edible mushroom, it's an edible mushroom, and most of them taste pretty good. Most of them taste of mushrooms, not all of them, of course. If I had to choose one, it would be the wood bluet. Because I love the flavor and I love the slippery, slightly sticky, slimy. This is sticky, slimy texture, which doesn't sound good, but actually it is. It just sort of ticks all the boxes. There's also a slight fragrance above and beyond the normal mushroom flavor, and the texture is basically it's rubbery, sticky, slimy. Those cooked well, and then
You should
in
have a
butter.
look back on the channel then, John. I recently did a video with a fantastic chef, Alex Goulding, and we cooked wood bluets on farinatas. And wood bluets, the reason I got him to do that with me was because I never really got on too well with that. The perfumey flavour, and the fact that they always end up quite slimy but he made a dish which has totally changed me, and now wood bluets are something that I absolutely love. You were talking about your Christmas tradition of picking seaweed. Even though I've never really found them my favourite mushroom, I've had a Christmas tradition for about the last 15 years of going out and picking wood bluets on Christmas Day, just to mainly to get me out of the chaos of the house and the kitchen, really. But it's a lovely thing to do. Go out foraging on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve to get yourself out of the chaos.
No, I do love it. I don't know what's the matter with you. What's wrong with sticky, slimy, rubbery? I think it's brilliant flavour, brilliant texture.
Fantastic. Right, let's talk a bit about your most recent book. So, the Spotter's Guide to the Countryside. Tell the viewers what that one's all about.
Yeah, the Spotters. That's not my most recent one, by the way. That's so the Observant Walker is my most recent, and the Spotter's Guide to the Countryside is the one before that. Both of them are really along the same lines. Ever since I started writing, even in the mushroom book I did with River Cottage, the River Cottage Mushroom Handbook, I wanted to explain more about the natural world than just telling people what a mushroom looks like, how you identify it, what you can mix it up with and you shouldn't do, that sort of thing. I thought it'd be much more interesting to go into some of the biology, and I go into quite a lot of the biology and the ecology of things, even in the River Cottage books. I sort of carried on with that. I wrote a natural history of the hedgerow, which went into minute detail of what you can find in a hedge. And the forager's calendar, there's little bit of tidbits of information about the biology and the interesting things that you find when you're foraging. And then it sort of went full out with the Spotter's Guide to the Countryside, where I took things that people would maybe not particularly familiar with the countryside, or even people who were familiar with the countryside, if they saw them, wondered what on earth they were. About half of the things are actually agricultural artifacts or agricultural structures, mega structures, really, like strip lynchets, pillow mounds where rabbits used to be kept, and so on. But also a lot about the biology, so a lot of biological things. So there's some hypomycetes. Can't remember. I'm not sure they've got a common name, but the golden fungus or something. I can't remember the common name for it.
Hypomycetes. I think they're the boletus eaters, aren't they? The hypomycetes.
That's bolete. That's the word. Yeah. So bolete eaters. Anyone seeing this? Why is that mushroom not only rotten but brilliant golden color? And it is so astonishing. What on earth is that thing that looks like which is the stinkhorn? Things like cordyceps species, and I think there's only one cordyceps that grows in Britain, although there are some other those Ophioglosswedes and things. They're weird looking things. They're little. They're about that big, about inch and a half tall, bright orange little tongue things covered in little orange balls, and they grow on moth larvae. I mean, you see that you wouldn't know if you dig it up. Actually, you can see that's actually the pupa, as it grows on the pupa. There's also a couple of others that are parasitic on false truffles, the Elaphomyces species, and they're even bigger, and they can be about 10 centimeters tall. And they're like lollipops growing out of the ground, and these are extraordinary things like plant galls. I mean, galls are incredible things, and very easy to identify as well, because they are almost invariably host specific. So if you know the name of the plant they're growing on, you go to your book on British galls, and you look up that host plant, and you'll have a list of the things that grow on it, and you think, oh yeah, it's that one. So they're extremely easy to identify. Rust fungi, fantastic. Smut fungi are incredible. There's one smut fungi. I don't know if you've ever seen smut fungus. Basically, ends up whichever plant it's growing on, it often grows on grasses, it will turn various parts of it black with the black spores, hence smut fungus. The most extraordinary one grows on red campion, which is famously pink. Well, it's a perennial plant, and the one particular smut fungus grows on this plant. It only grows on the male plant. It would infect, so it lands on a male plant, it infects it, it will go right down to the base of the plant, consume little bits of it, the sparse nutrients between the cells, and the next year it will infect the male parts, the anthers. And instead of producing pollen, it produces these spores. Then it finds itself on another plant, the spores fly away and end up on another plant. If it lands on a male, that's fine because it can do the same thing all over again. If it lands on a female, it can't, because female plants do not have anthers. So what the fungus does, and this is unbelievable, it actually changes the sex of the plant. What was once a female becomes a male.
Wow, that's
great,
incredible. That's fungus amaze me. They absolutely amaze me. The cordyceps that you were mentioning, they're something I find absolutely fascinating. Anyone who hasn't seen, I can't remember which David Attenborough program it was, where the cordyceps take over the ant's brain and make them climb up to the highest part of the local canopy so that they can grow a fungus out of the ant's head. And I assume that so that the spores can go as far as possible from there. And the galls you were talking about, they are just oak galls. You were talking about them being plant specific, but just the range of different galls that you can get on oak trees is incredible. Some of them remind me of the face of from what's the film, Predator? That film with Arnold Schwarzenegger. They look like the face of the Predator. And I actually put civilization as we know it down to the iron gall. It's one of the most important things I think we have from history. You know, the round one that was used to make ink. So almost everything that was written down from the Doomsday Book onwards, after they stopped using ink caps, was down to one of those galls as well. So they're fascinating, and it's lovely to know about them. And they're also possibly responsible for the knowledge that we've managed to pass down through generations. And you cover lots of that in the is that in the Spotter's Guide to the Countryside?
Yes, that's in the Spotter's Guide to the Countryside.
So let's talk about the other most recent book, The Observant Walker.
Yeah, the Observant Walker. This is something I had in mind for a while as well. Profile Books came up with the name of The Observant Walker, and I thought that was an excellent name. But I suppose if I could have my time and all the time again, I would call it How to Be a Naturalist, because really that's what it does. And it follows my exploits. And indeed, my wife Diane came with me on 7 of these. We went to various parts of the country. Went to Hayling Island to do a coastal walk. We went across London from Fulham to Marble Arch. We went up Snowdonia. We went to Northumberland, went to a Scottish island, and really the idea was to describe everything we saw on the way. Again, this is coming back to show people how very much there is in any spot you want to go. Even in Fulham, there's loads of stuff in Fulham, and also I gave, this is what you do. This is how you become a naturalist. You go out and you look, you observe, you see something, you think, what's that? I'm not sure we all do that, but you need to take it one stage further and find out what it is. So also go into the details of how you identify things like the keys you can use, whether you have a basic question and answer session, cheats like if you find a green beetle with swollen thighs, and you just type in green beetle swollen thighs, it tells you the name straight away. It's a swollen thigh beetle, actually, but it wasn't exactly rocket science. But these various tricks and the various books you can buy, but mostly it is to encourage people to look. I don't really mind if they don't, but I would like them at least to wonder what something is.
Oh,
I don't always get
absolutely.
that. I I don't always get the right answer, or I can sit here for hours and hours. I got microscopes and chemicals and all sorts of things. Don't always get the name of something. Really irritating. I think irritation is a very important trait to possess if you're interested in natural history. You cannot bear to not know, and I just get so annoyed. That's how I started, because that Daldinia, that little cramp ball, is growing on the ash tree in 19 something or other. I was so infuriated with myself for not knowing. I mean, there's no reason why I should have known, but I was still cross. There was a bit of the world I didn't understand at all. I had to find out.
So
Find out.
frustration is a learning tool. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's one that I found very useful as well. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to school for a part of my schooling up in a rural part of Scotland, and that was where I first learned about pignut, which I just found amazing. Digging up pig nuts, which obviously, guys, you're not supposed to do from any wild place. But up in Scotland, the teachers used to take us out on rambles, and I got introduced to pignut as a 12-year-old, and being able to find a plant, dig up this amazing tasting root, and eat it was something that I absolutely loved. And I learned a bit about orchids and things like that up there. But then, unfortunately, moved back to Croydon. Sorry, everyone in Croydon, I'm not slagging it off too much, where there isn't so much green space. But that was where I learned to forage. That was where I found my first Babelitus, where I found my first wood bluet, where I found a park in the centre of Croydon that was absolutely covered in fairy ring champignons. So, as John says, wherever you are, be it Fulham or Croydon or the centre of Birmingham, there's something interesting in nature around for the observant walker to look out for the budding naturalist to look out for. And that's kind of what I consider myself, is a naturalist and a mycophile, really. I don't know about you, John. Is that a pretty good description of how you see yourself?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. It doesn't. I don't feel it. I think just frustrated West Dorset. That's me. Just got to know. The really annoying thing is that there's so much. I mean writing this grassland book, and I found a list on one particular grassland, which is just up the road from me, and someone had actually made a list of all the flies. There was 100 species of fly found on the site. I did know there were a lot of flies, but the people who study these flies, they're all members. Well, many of them are members of something called the Dipterist flies, Dipterist Forum, and these are wonderful people, and they are so knowledgeable. I like to think I'm knowledgeable about the fungi at least, but I want to be a dipterist as well. I want to be a hymenopterist, and I want to be a
I love that
lepidopterist.
about foraging. Yeah, I love that about foraging. We've got a triple SI site just up the road from me that's triple SI for soldier flies and snail flies. And so obviously seeing that, I had to find out what a soldier fly and a snail fly were. But that's what I love about foraging. It's not one of these. I, I tend to get a little bit snotty every now and again with people who study one thing, you know, the monoscience people, because foraging, it takes in so many different topics that you can never stop learning. You've got obviously mycology and botany, with a little bit of geology, some dendrology, some entomology thrown in, and then you've got folklore, and then you've got cooking, and then you've got everything that you can learn about the sea and the plants that grow by the sea and the seaweeds, and any one of those topics is something that you can study for your whole life if you want to. But what foraging gives you is the ability to dip in and out of lots of different topics, so that when you get maybe a little bit bored and frustrated trying to identify exactly what gall you've got, you can put that to one side and start learning about the plant that the gall was on instead, and take it somewhere else. It's a very broad topic, one that you can keep your brain active with for the whole of your life. I think that's one of the best things about foraging.
Yeah, there's just not enough time. There's not enough time to do everything, and you would you 1,000 lifetimes would not be enough to cover even just the species of the British Isles. There's just not enough time. 1,000 lifetimes, nowhere near enough.
No,
I don't.
but
I actually like. I like specialists. I like specialists, and a bit of me wishes I could be one. And I am tempted to dispense with everything in my retirement, apart from the fungi, and just get better at that. There's plenty of room to get better. There always is.
I tend to find I haven't got quite enough concentration to become a specialist, so that's why I like to dip in and out of lots of different things, and that's why foraging really is perfect for me. Maybe that will change. Fungi is certainly the part of it that I'm most interested in and that I've learned the most about. So that brings me on to the courses we're going to be running together later in the year. We're going to be together teaching people about mushrooms. We've got a few dates up here in Herefordshire. One of them's already, I think, sold out, so we're adding another one. And I think by the time this video goes live, we'll have another date down. One of my favourite, I can't wait to take you to this place, John. One of my favourite places to go and find fungus. Last year, my favourite find there was a tiered tooth, Hericium serratum, in full fruit, looking absolutely amazing. But the venue, in about 2 or 3 acres of woodland, must have over 1,000 species of fungus. So we're not, you say there's not enough time, there probably won't be enough time in the day that day to talk about all the fungus. So really looking forward to doing that with you, and you teaching me a little bit, because you are a few years ahead of me on the fungus. You certainly know a bit more than me, so you're going to be the mycologist that day. You're going to bring along some of your chemicals and do some of the fancy color changes for us.
Yeah, yes, I'll bring some of those along. I might bring. I've just spent well, it was a year ago now. I spent a small fortune on a new microscope. So I might be, it's a bit big, but I'll bring it along. But it's really
Really?
yeah, yeah. Do you think?
That would be amazing. Yeah, well, we spent a few £1,000s on a microscope a few
Did
years
you?
ago, but I'm still struggling with how to measure in microns personally. So it's more of an ornament than something I use practically now. I can see different spore shapes, but actually using it as an identification tool, apart from for shapes, is pretty useless for me at the moment. So maybe you can teach me a thing or two about that on the course as well. That would be fantastic.
Well, I shall try. It's certainly a very expensive ornament if you're just looking at shapes, and not all that good for the Basidiomycetes, basically the mushrooms, because they tend to be spherical or the shape of a lemon. Size is important. You have got a graticule, haven't you?
I'm not sure what a graticule is, so you're already teaching me.
I don't think you've got one there. That you can measure them straight away through the eyepiece. You just count. You have to set it, but you have to count the gradations because you can see that as well.
But next time you come up, you can teach me how to use it properly. Right. I think I've probably now taken up about as much of your time as I should. So I've just got a few last things to say. I'm very grateful for your time today, John, and I hope all of the viewers have enjoyed this little interview. Where can we get your books? For anyone that's interested, that's been watching the video, where's the best place to buy your books?
Well, they are available all over the country, bookshops, and of course online as well. I don't mind. Obviously, we'd like to support our independent bookshops, but not all bookshops, including big ones, have always been very kind to me. So just go to your nearest shop. And if you can't get to a shop, you know what to do.
Go online, obviously. All right. Well, brilliant, John. Really looking forward to seeing you again in a couple of months, and I hope that you hit your deadline with this new grassland book, and and the viewers couldn't see the face you just pulled there, unfortunately. And I look forward to receiving a copy of that, and of course the naming of the shrew. Like I said, I think that's the only one of your books that I haven't got. So feel free to send me one of those if you want to. And yeah, we are looking forward to getting together in October. And until then, we shall stay in touch, I'm sure. Anything else that you would like to add before we wrap this little interview up?
No, I think just to suggest people they get out there and they find stuff and they look at it, maybe take some home, maybe just take a photograph, try and find out what it is, even if it's only to kingdom, because sometimes I just don't know which kingdom something belongs to. It could be plant, animal, vegetable, mineral, but just look, just observe, and also thank you very much for asking me today. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, Marlo.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, as John said, guys, get outside and get looking around, but don't look down the whole time because you might bump into a hawthorn and you might end up missing some spectacular views. There's a terrible joke, John, that I use on my courses. There was a group of foragers out, a group of fungi foragers out, and a group of bird watchers out, and they bumped into each other. One's looking down, one's looking up. I told you it was a terrible joke. That's definitely a good place to finish. John, it's been a pleasure.
It did actually happen. I maybe got that from one of my books because it actually happened. It was at in Lincolnshire, on the Lincolnshire coast, and they said, oh, it was a British Mycological Society, and there was all these bird watchers all looking up, and us we were of course looking down, and one of the ornithologists came over and said, "What are you doing?" Because it didn't make any sense to a bird watcher.
Oh, maybe I did get that from one of your books. I've got to say, you were back when I was foraging from my teens, but you were the first person on TV. The first books I bought were Roger Phillips and Richard Mabey, but you were the first person I saw on TV doing any sort of foraging seriously. I think Ray Mears was doing his kind of historical things, and I'm not sure if Bear Grylls was out on TV before you were, but you were certainly the first person foraging around the UK doing the sort of things that I was interested in that was visible on TV. So yeah, since then, I think yours was the third foraging book I ever got after Food for Free and the Roger Phillips book. And I honestly got to thank you for that. You've been a bit of an inspiration from then on. So thank you very much, and thanks for today.
Thank you, Marlo. How nice to be an inspiration. It was very kind of you to say so.
Right, let's wrap it up there before we get too much gooiness going on. Thanks, John.